All right, good morning, everybody. I just got to go ahead to start. I know it had some technical difficulties at the beginning, but I'm so glad that you all are here. I'm happy to be speaking with you all again this year. My name is Phillip. I'm the founder of Enable Special Needs Planning, where we believe that planning should be focused on allowing our loved ones to live a life of purpose and happiness and fulfillment. And to me, that's what planning should be focused on, and that's what the conversations of planning should be centered on. And we strive in everything we do. And in this presentation, I want to give you peace of mind. Peace of mind about your child's future, peace of mind about the planning process that we're going to walk you through today. And that's ultimately what families are looking for. We serve families in all states, and every single family we serve tells us we are just searching for peace of mind. And so I assume that you guys are the same. So before we get started, this is going to be more of a workshop style session. I want you guys to not just sit and listen to me. I want this to be an interactive session where you guys are taking notes and asking questions. And I'm going to get you started in each of the areas of planning that I believe that I have seen from my family's experiences are so important. So you had the opportunity to download the participant guide before you jumped in here. If you haven't, that's wonderful. We will walk through that participant guide as we go through this. If you haven't got it, don't worry. Don't leave here to go get it. I will put on the screen every single question that we are going to be walking through and discussing. And then afterwards, you feel free to download that to fill in the gaps of what we haven't gotten to. So, but I am so excited to be with you guys today. So, I believe that each of you here are in separate stages of planning journeys, right? Some of you, you're right in the very beginning stages of planning. Maybe today is the first day that you've really thought through what you need to consider as you're planning for your child's future. Some of you might have done some steps of planning. You might have implemented some steps and talked to a financial advisor or an attorney, and you feel really good about your progress. But maybe you realize there's much more that you need to consider. And then lastly, the group that might be here is you feel really good about where you are in your planning process. You feel like you've implemented the strategies that you needed to plan for today and plan for the future. But you're here really to get confirmation that, yes, in fact, what you have done is what's correct for your child. So regardless of where you fit, my goal with our time together is to give you, again, what I talked about earlier is peace of mind. Peace of mind that what you have done is correct for your family, or giving you peace of mind that now you have an outline of what conversations you need to have. And again, because peace of mind is what we are all searching for. Peace of mind of knowing that our loved one's future is secure and well planned for. And so before we dive into the workshop, I have a question that I want you to think through. In the past, what has held you back from creating a plan that creates that peace of mind? What are those things that have prevented you from planning? And I'm going to come back to that question a little bit later, but I wanted to at least throw that question out and let you begin thinking about that, because that is very important. What in the past has been the barrier for you to create a plan? But before we jump into that, I think it's important for you to understand a little bit about me, my background, why I'm so passionate about this topic, and why I have maybe a unique focus of what special needs planning I believe should be. And so when I was 4 years old, my sister Sarah was born. And just like so many families across the country that I've talked to over the years, my parents didn't get a congratulations from the doctors when she was born. Instead, my parents heard, "I'm sorry. Your daughter has Down syndrome." And over the next few weeks and few months, various doctors and nurses and professionals, each one by one, gave my parents their limited expectations for Sarah's life. My parents heard things like, "Your daughter might not be able to ever ride a bicycle. She might not be able to ever be in a mainstream classroom. She probably won't ever be able to live on her own." And those were just a few of a long list of limitations that professionals wanted my parents to be prepared for regarding the abilities that my sister would not have. And if we were to fast forward 32 years later for today, well, one of those things that doctors told them, and word for word, was most kids with Down syndrome usually don't learn to read. And you guys should expect the same. Just setting those false expectations over and over and over again with my parents. Again, if we were to fast forward to today, they now find my sister, Sarah, volunteering in a second grade classroom. Well, one of her many duties in her volunteer position is tutoring the kids in their reading abilities. Just the exact thing the doctor says she would never be able to accomplish herself, she's now helping others. And there's a particular child in her classroom a few years ago who had fallen so far behind in his reading abilities that the parents had, or the teacher brought the parents in to discuss her concerns. And together, the teacher and the parents decided to hold that child back in the second grade the following year. And for whatever reason, this teacher put Sarah with the student. And for a short time on a daily basis, he would spend time reading to her. And she would read to him. And together they would work through comprehension worksheets. And at the very end of the school year, when the teacher would retest the entire class, she found that this child had actually caught up to the rest of the peers. And in fact, would move on to the third grade with the rest of his friends. And my mom told me the story about what had happened, and told me about on the very last day of school, this child walked up to Sarah with a handwritten thank you card and a pad full of stickers that he bought for her that morning at the school store. And he gave my sister a hug and he said, "Thank you." And as Mom was telling the stories, Sarah was standing right there. And she had a grin from ear to ear, and she was so proud of herself. And she was so proud of that child for everything he had accomplished, everything he'd worked for. But I also saw that she was proud of herself. She was proud that she had the ability to make a difference in that child's life. And that really right there is the foundation of how we help families plan and our beliefs of what planning means. Because I believe that planning should be focused on allowing everybody's ability to be impactful. Each of us here today strive to be impactful, make a difference in others' lives. And that's really what gives us purpose to our life. And we are not unique in that. My sister is not unique in that. And your child is no different. I believe that your child, in his or her own unique way, absolutely has the ability to impact the lives of others, which in turn is going to help give them happiness and fulfillment and purpose. And the great thing about it is, I know that you all believe the same thing as I do. Or you wouldn't be signed up for this conference today or signed up for this session. So that's amazing commonality that we have. But to me, this has got to be the center of every planning conversation. What are we doing that's allowing our loved ones to live a life of purpose and impact? And so to help you understand where we're going to, that you guys can see where we are now and where we're headed to, here's what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to be talking to you about the 3 different changes that I have seen in the 12 years that I've been in this industry, in our society, and in many other areas, and how that affects our special needs planning journey. I want to talk to you about what traditionally I see special needs planning being versus what I believe the conversation should be focused on based on my family's experiences, based on so many families that we serve across the country. And then the meat of what we're going to be discussing today, like I said, is this workshop, is this participant guide. We're going to walk through the areas of what I believe holistic special needs planning should be. And then I'm going to give you another free guide that's going to allow you to further the conversation that we have today and be able to help you further those plans with your family and for your child. And so our culture is constantly changing and evolving. And these changes really impact how we plan for our loved ones. So the first change that I believe that we as parents and loved ones and caregivers need to understand involves the social expectations and norms that we have. Because it used to be, if you had a child with special needs, the expectation was that your child would either live with you throughout their entire life, or if their needs were too great for you to care for at home, you might have to put them in a government-run facility, much like the institutionalized settings that we have heard about. But today, so much has changed. Today, you as parents have so many hopes and dreams that are beyond that, right? You want your child to achieve so much and thrive in school and be included in the classroom and develop friendships and relationships, have opportunities post high school, find a meaningful job or volunteer position or vocation, and be involved in their community, and possibly live as independently as possible. And the list goes on and on and on about what you are hoping for your child's future. Am I right? And that's amazing, all the hopes that you have for your child. But we have come so far in such a short period of time, because 30 years ago, that wasn't normal. That wasn't the expectation for what you as parents today have. And the second area that we have seen enormous change over time in is technology. And it's pretty apparent that technology is rapidly changing, right? And we could argue back and forth all day whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we can't deny that it is changing. And so 30 years ago, we didn't have much as far as access to technology that supports our loved ones. But today, medicine has evolved so much. There are so many innovative therapies and specialized devices and individualized services to assist your child, allowing our loved ones to have so many more opportunities. I'm sure some of you, or most of you, have seen and experienced numerous ways that technology has benefited our family's lives and your child's life. And so right now, I'm thinking of a family that we're currently serving who has got a young daughter who is completely nonverbal. But despite that, she has a device that allows her to communicate her wants and her needs with her family and her friends and interact with her peers. And her mother told me a story about the first day that she typed, "I love you, Mommy," and spoke that into her device. And her mom said that was one of the most precious memories that she will always hang on to. And I know you guys all have your stories about how technology has allowed your loved ones to do amazing things. Sometimes we take it for granted, right? I know I do. And so the last consideration and the last change that I've seen in the 12 years is the financial considerations. And really, this goes back to the social norms that I talked about, and this goes back to the technology changes that I've seen. Because again, 30 years ago, there weren't many options. Most families planned for their child to stay at home. But again, today, you have much bigger hopes and dreams for your child's life. You want your child to thrive and have opportunities right now. And you want them to be able to take advantage of the many, many resources that are coming out that are going to allow your child to live this amazing life. But planning for all of these opportunities today and in the future adds another layer of complexity when it comes to planning financially. So we see how all of these changes have happened in such a short period of time. But despite all of these positive changes that I've seen the special needs planning industry and process really hasn't changed one bit. The conversations that I saw early in my career that I'm seeing today are the same conversations that were being had with my parents 32 years ago when they began planning for my sister's future. And so traditional special needs planning, this is right here on your screen. This is the model that was demonstrated to me when I first entered the industry 12 years ago. And this might look very similar to you, very similar to you. So there's two different legs of special needs planning. One is financial planning, and the other is legal planning. And so many of you, I would imagine, have sat down with a financial planner. If you have, I commend you for that, for being proactive. That's amazing. But if you have talked to a financial planner, you've likely talked about life insurance. You've likely talked about ways to funnel assets from your estate into a vehicle that's going to protect your child from losing government benefits. That likely sounds familiar on those conversations. And then the second leg of special needs planning, traditionally, is legal planning. And again, many of you have likely sat down with an attorney to discuss your legal planning needs. And if you have, you've talked about wills and trust and powers of attorney, and special needs trust, and guardianship for today, but potentially guardianship for the future. And those are the two areas, like I said, that I was demonstrating what special needs planning was. But if we look at this model of this industry standard of special needs planning, what has to happen for this plan to go into effect? And when I'm live at an event and speaking, most families nod their heads and a few will respond and say, we have to pass away, or we as parents are no longer here. And so is that all you want to plan for? What happens when you're not here? Because we just talked about the abundant vision that you all have about your child's future. And so I looked at this when I started this ministry 12 years ago from a proud big brother standpoint. And I said, no. I believe that planning should be focused on allowing my sister, allowing your loved one to live a fulfilling, a purposeful, and impactful life today and every day in the future. And most families that I meet, my parents included, are sold a life insurance policy. And that life insurance policy, coupled with a special needs trust, really is the industry standard of what special needs planning is. And in my opinion, that's a cookie cutter approach that only focuses on the what ifs in life. But so much has changed in our families' lives. The planning process is not. And so I believe that families like ours want and need so much more out of the planning conversation. Our conversations have got to be centered on all the amazing abilities that our loved ones have. It's centered on creating abundant opportunities for today and every day in the future. And this unique approach that we guide families through was developed because I believe that my sister, I believe that your child deserves a better conversation. And so that's what we're going to be going through today, and to help families plan in that bigger vision. We have 5 different areas of planning that we guide families through that I'm going to walk you through today through this guidebook. And like I said, we will be working through this guidebook that you might have in front of you. If you don't have it, you can follow along and download it after we're done and fill in the blanks. But I would encourage you to not only use this guidebook for today, in today's conversation, but use this and our other free resources to have conversations with your child. Have conversations with your family members who are helping you plan. Use this time together that we have as a catalyst to help expand the planning journey that you guys are on. But I've got another question for you guys before we jump in. When you hear the words planning for the future, or you hear the words special needs planning, how does that make you feel? So when I ask families in person, whether they're sitting in my office or we're at live events, hear the words that I hear. I hear we feel overwhelmed with the amount of decisions that we need to make. We feel frustrated at not knowing what to do. We feel confused because sometimes Google gives us conflicting information about what's right for our family. We're worried about our child's future at some points. We're afraid of what happens if we're not here. We feel stuck in the planning year. Can you guys relate to any of those emotions? I know I can. I know my family felt these as we planned for Sarah's future, and we continually feel these emotions as we expand on her plan. So guys, these emotions right here are normal. Every single family goes through these emotions through their journey. But I have seen that we have got to find a way to overcome these emotions, because these are the reasons of what holds families back in their planning journey. This is what I believe stalls the planning process. And if we're honest with each other today about planning in general, nobody likes to plan, right? We all know that we possibly need to, but nobody's excited about it. Nobody wants to plan. But despite the fact that not many families want to plan or are excited about this, every single day our team helps families from across the country walk through a journey of planning. And when a family comes to us and says we're ready, I always am curious about why now? Why is it now that you're ready to commit to this planning journey, despite the fact that nobody wants to? And so every family has their own unique reasons of why they're planning, what's important to them about the process. But as I ask more and more and more questions, I find it always falls within two categories. One, obviously, they're planning for their child's future. And two, they have other family goals that they're trying to plan for. And so for their child, what I hear when I ask why they're planning, what's important to you about planning, I always hear, I want my child to be happy. I want my child to feel fulfilled at whatever they're doing. And I want them to feel included with their peer groups, within a community. Those are the reasons that I hear most families wanting to plan for their child. And for their family, they want to have peace of mind. Again, that comes up again. They want to feel full of hope when they look to the future. And they want to feel secure in today and in the future. And so I asked you at the beginning of our time together, what are your reasons for joining the session? And if you had peace of mind that your child and your entire family was well planned for, what does that look like? And I believe that keeping your focus on that answer, which is your why for planning, that's going to help you overcome those negative emotions. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time digging deeper into this why, because I believe it's one of the most important parts of the special needs planning journey, because I find that these emotions that we talked about, again, stall families in their tracks. And so we're going to start into the workshop period. So page 1 of your participant guide, like I said, if you don't have it, the questions are going to be on your screen. So page 1 is going to help you think through your why. And so we put 3 different exercises, 3 different questions together to begin to help you thinking about this. So I encourage you, as we're going through each of these, take some notes. Begin thinking about your why on these. And so the first question is, what's preventing you from planning for your child's future? What are those things that you've identified in the past that have made planning difficult? And so that first question helps you think through what obstacles are in your way. Maybe what limiting beliefs might be holding you back. I talked to you about what my parents' expectations were from the doctors. And those can create limiting beliefs in families. What have you heard in the past that's not true? And is that preventing you from planning? Question number 2, when you think about special needs planning, how does that make you feel? Now, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but this second question helps you evaluate your current emotions around planning. So do you generally feel positive about planning? Are you excited? Are you hopeful? Are you relieved to finally be thinking about it? Or are there negative emotions that creep up? Are you worried about the process? Are you afraid of it? Do you feel so overwhelmed that it's more negative than it is positive? So it's likely a combination of both. But it's important for us to identify how you feel so that we can help overcome those negative emotions. And so question number 3 is a very important one. What do you want to be for your family? And so this third question helps you think about your why for planning. What is it you want to be for your family? And I intentionally asked that question with be instead of what do you want to do? Because by focusing on what you want to be for your family, this allows you to focus on and identify the true benefits that you and your family are going to experience from planning. What do you hope to achieve through the planning process? Do you want to be able to provide opportunities for your family and for your child? Do you want to be the catalyst that allows your family to finally have peace of mind? So everybody's be is different. And so, again, as I said, because this is a virtual event, we're not going to pause and discuss these as we would if it was a live event. But I would encourage you to take some notes on this, but then really think through these questions. Have conversations with other members of your family who are going to help you through planning journey. Brainstorm these reasons of what's been preventing you from planning, but what you want to be for your family. And so now that you've gotten your why started, the first step of the planning process is creating a vision plan. And I encourage you to start your planning discussions with your family with this step, because this vision plan is going to help you to continue to develop your why that we just talked about. And it's going to help everybody get on the same page for what you're planning for. It's going to help you paint a picture of what success looks like through your planning journey. So the vision plan is going to describe what a great life for your child looks like. And this includes your hopes and your dreams for your child's life. It also includes their dreams and their hopes for their own life. After all, it is their plan. I believe that they should have a say in what success looks like when and if you feel like it's appropriate. And so some important things to think through before we dive into the exercise on the vision plan. Your vision plan is likely going to change. What you set our sights up for, what success looks like today, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that vision of success is going to change. Your child develops and their abilities change and their likes and dislikes change. And this vision plan is so important in my opinion because every other decision in the planning journey comes back to this vision plan. And we've got to ask the question of, does making this decision get us closer to finding success in our vision plan? Is it getting us closer to our child living a great life? And again, as I mentioned, your child, I believe, should be involved in this conversation when you feel like it's appropriate. After all, it is their life. And so I realized that oftentimes thinking about the future, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years and beyond, can seem daunting. What does the future look like? There's so many uncertainties, right? And that's difficult to know and understand. And so I told you the story about my sister. And I'm always proud to share that story about her, about how it seemed like doctors told my parents she would never be able to read. And then seemingly fast forward 33 years later, she's now volunteering in a school teaching kids to read. But what I didn't tell you was the difficulties in our family getting there. I didn't tell you about the hours and hours and hours of therapies that our family all went to make sure that she had the underlying abilities to continue to build on. I didn't tell you about the hours of reading that I remember spending with her, teaching her how to read on a couch. I didn't tell you how much she hated school growing up and about all the behavior issues that she had. I didn't tell you about how many times she hid from her teachers because she hated school that much. And about how many times I got called out of my classroom to go help find Sarah because they had lost her again. And I look back on those moments, especially those times in school, and I look back and I find that they're quite funny as a proud big brother. She was pretty smart. She didn't want to be in school, and she found ways to get out of that. But at the time, I guarantee you my parents didn't find that was funny. And I wonder how many times that they looked back on those conversations that they had with doctors and professionals, and how many times they asked themselves, were they right? Will she never be able to accomplish anything? So if you ask my parents back then about what her future would be, I almost guarantee there's no way that they would say that she would be volunteering in any classroom. So my point is with that, it might be difficult to look into the future. These are so many unknowns. And the vision is going to change over time. So it's okay if you can't think very far in the future. But it's important for us to identify what does success look like. Maybe it's 5 months from now. But it's important for us to start with what is success. And so for page 2 in your participant guide, we're going to be working through this vision plan exercise. And so where are you now? It's important to us to identify where are we starting, but then also to identify where do we want to get to? What is our goal? And this is true in anything in life, any goals and aspirations that we have, but it's so true when we're talking about planning for the future of our loved ones and the great things that we want to see them accomplish. We've got to set goals, and we've got to be able to monitor those goals. And so on your sheet, starting on page 2 and moving into page 3, what does your child's life look like today when it comes to their level of independence, or getting to a level of independence that you're looking for, or their social life, or their spiritual life, their education, their job or vocation? What does our home environment look like right now? And there's many other things that you as parents have as terms of goals for your child. And where are you at today? And then where do we want to be in the future? And so right now in the second column, I have, what do you hope your child's life looks like 5 years from now? And again, like I said, 5 years might be too far. Maybe we need to bump that back to 5 months. Maybe a year in the future. But what does success look like, and what are the areas that we want to see change in? Again, this is one of the most important steps of the planning journey, because we have to identify why we're planning in the first place. So, again, encourage you guys to take this, fill this out. After our time together, have conversations with your child on this. Have conversations with other family members about this. So the next step of the planning journey is creating a financial plan for your child's future. So the financial plan is going to provide the strategy of how to pay for all of the services and the resources to help you and your child achieve what your goals are inside your vision plan. It also addresses the challenge of how to provide financially when and if you are no longer able to do so for your child. And so before you can start creating a financial plan for your entire family, including your loved one with special needs, you need to assess your current financial situation. What's going on? Where are we at today? Similar to those previous goals I talked about. And then you can begin implementing strategies that are going to enable both your family's financial future and your son or daughter's financial future to be secure. And many families that we work with tell us that they don't know how they'd be able to begin juggling everything. They don't know how they'd be able to begin thinking about their own retirement while they're planning for their child's future. But we have found for our plans to be successful, we've got to make sure that every single family's financial plan, including their child's, is working together. Because you guys as a family have so many goals. Your family's plan and your child's plan can't be two disjointed plans. They've got to be working together to make sure that both are successful. And so, starting on page 3, and it goes until page 5, the exercise we're going to be walking through in terms of the financial plan is a question of how much money would your child really need? So I ask this question to families as we are entering in the financial planning process. If you weren't here, how much would your child need to live the life that you would want for them? And most often than not, I get blank stares from families because families haven't thought through that. And if they have thought through, they say, how do we ever determine how much money we need to plan for? What would that look like? And so, as I mentioned, financial planning, and especially planning in general, should not be focused on life's what ifs, but it's so important for us to understand how much money our child would need if we aren't here. And so our process here, like I said, starting on page 3 of the guide, will help you go through that. It's a worksheet that will help identify what are the expenses that your child would have and how do we plan for that in the future. And so I'm going to quickly walk through a case study for you to give you just a brief example of what this might look like. Every family is going to be completely different, so your numbers that you work through are going to be different than this case study that I'm showing you. But in this case study, we have a family who's got a 15-year-old with a life expectancy of 75 years. And so here are the monthly expenses that this child would need if the family wasn't here. And inside the workbook that I have, it's going to give you more details of how to come up with these numbers. But for this family, for example, $1,200 for monthly housing expenses is what they would need. Transportation would be $800 a month. Personal expenses, $600. Future asset replacements, which would be the technology that we talked about earlier, iPhones, iPads, TV, whatever it might be, replacing technology, replacing things as it becomes old. This family told me $400. And so if we add those lines up, we're looking at $3,000 a month that we would need for our child if we weren't here. We have a 15-year-old child who has a life expectancy of 75 years, so we need 60 years of $3,000 a month coming in, 720 months. And so for this hypothetical family, we're looking at $2.16 million. And that is a number that is daunting to every single family. Am I right? How are we ever going to come up with $2.16 million? Is what I hear from every single family that we talk to, or whatever that number is for them. In reality, it's not as daunting as what that looks like. There are ways to make sure that that happens, because we're not needing a bucket of $2.16 million, because not many families have that, right? Just laying around in their backyard or in their checking account. We need to find a strategy that will allow our child to have $3,000 a month to be able to support their lifestyle. As I mentioned, that's easier than what it seems to do. So don't let that $2.16 million be a daunting number that prevents you from having these conversations, because it's easily attainable. And so in that example I share with you, we need $2.16 million. How do we bridge that gap? How do we get there? Because there's something that we have all been told over time. We have a need for our child at some point in life, potentially, to have a bucket of money that's going to give them the lifestyle that you want. But we've been told over and over and over again that we can only have $2,000 in our child's name. And if we have more than that, we lose very valuable government benefits. So how do we bridge that gap? So from a 10,000-foot view, and we're going to go into more detail on this, we have two options. We have a special needs trust, and we have a newer option within the past few years, which is an ABLE account. And I get questions on these all the time, and that's why we're going to spend some time diving into these particular vehicles for our planning journey. But from a 10,000-foot view, how I look at these, ABLE accounts are used to shelter and grow money tax-free for living expenses, for opportunities, and for experiences for your child today and in the midterm. And then special needs trusts are usually used for estate planning purposes, for more long-term planning. And so we're going to do a deep dive into this, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of this presentation about these, because I know that there's confusion, but I'm going to do my best right here to give you the comparison of the two. So I'm going to start very high level. A trust, what is that? What does a trust even mean? So a trust is really a relationship between three different parties. There's a donor who is giving the money to this trust. And so for most families, the donor is you, parents. And they're going to supply the money for this trust somehow. And that's the financial planning process that will help understand how that's possible. And then there's a trustee, the second relationship in this trust. The trustee's job is to hold and manage and administer and distribute the funds according to the donor's wishes. And then there's a beneficiary. The beneficiary in this case would be your child. They are the individual that is going to be receiving the assets from this trust to support the lifestyle that you as parents want. And so there's reasons that estate planning has used trust for years and years and years. It's really because this is an easy way for parents and individuals to know that even after their passing, they can still help control and protect assets for a future generation. And so a special needs trust, and how it relates to this conversation, is a type of trust that's tailored to an individual with special needs, that is designed to manage the assets for that person's benefit while not compromising access to the important government benefits that we talked about. And there are three main types of special needs trust. There's a first-party trust, there's a third-party trust, and then there's the pool trust. And in each of these trusts that are listed on your screen here, the individual we're planning for is the beneficiary of each of those. And so I'm going to walk through each of these briefly to give you the understanding of what each of these does and how we can use these. So a first-party trust is a trust that holds assets that belong to the beneficiary. So in this case with families like ours, a first-party trust would be if your child received an inheritance outright in his or her name, or if they received a settlement in their name from a lawsuit or medical malpractice or whatever that would be. So if your child all of a sudden received a windfall of money, they would be able to put that money in a first-party trust for themselves without losing those government benefits. And this is not a reason to delay the planning process because it can be complicated. Most often, it takes a while to get these going, and most families lose government benefits for an extended period of time if that happens. So it's not a reason, this first-party trust, to delay the planning conversation. It's just as a way for you to pivot if and when Aunt Mary didn't realize your child couldn't receive an inheritance. So a first-party trust, to make it simple, is your child's own money that is put in a trust to protect it from government benefits. A third-party trust is trust that holds money that is being donated, a donor, from somebody else. So this can be an aunt and uncle. This can be you as parents taking money and putting it in an account that's protected from government benefits while the beneficiary is your child. And then lastly, a pooled trust is a type of trust that is pooling together many families' money to manage it. And this is oftentimes a cheaper way of going than administering your own trust. And there's positives and there's negatives with pooled trust. And again, it depends on every single family. And so ultimately, why a trust exists. We talked about this in just a little bit ago. The trust exists because we know that our loved one can only have $2,000 in his or her name. But we know that we need more than that to provide for a great future for them if something happens. And so Specialties Trust allows you this vehicle to get both, have the best of both worlds, getting government benefits while still being able to provide your child supplemental benefits through your guys' individual plan. And so for a first-party trust, a couple things to understand. First-party trust, because it's your child's money, if and when they pass away, Medicaid can come back and recapture those assets that they have paid over time. A benefit of a third-party trust, if it's administered correctly, is that Medicaid cannot come back with a payback provision. That money stays with the family and can move on to another family member if your child were to pass away. So there's very, very big differences that we have to be aware of. Three. And again, a lot more questions might come out of that. Happy to answer those questions at the end. But like I said, every family is unique. Every family's needs are different. And so the second part of this, of how do we shelter money from the government in a legal way, is these ABLE accounts. And so again, why we need ABLE accounts, it still comes back to that $2,000. How are we able to save money for our loved ones if they can't have more than $2,000 in their name? And so these ABLE accounts have been pushed by families and lawmakers for years. Families kept pushing lawmakers to say, we need the ability to plan for our child's future without losing these valuable government benefits. And so in 2014, federal law opened up the ABLE program and made it available for every single state to adapt and adopt their own program. Every state could change certain details. And so some questions that are important to understand with ABLE accounts is who's eligible. And so anybody who has a disability prior to age 26 is able to open up an ABLE account. And there are certain numbers that we have to be aware of with these ABLE accounts. The first number is $15,000, if you're taking notes. And so $15,000 is the max that we can contribute to an ABLE account annually. The next number that we have to be aware of is $100,000. And we can't have more than $100,000 in this account without losing SSI. And even if we lose SSI because we have too much money, Medicaid still happens. We still have Medicaid, but we lose SSI. And all we have to do is spend down that account below $100,000, and SSI is back in the picture. And then most states have a $500,000 cap of the total amount that you can have in an account like this. One other thing to be aware of with ABLE accounts is that currently most states have a provision that Medicaid can come back and recapture the funds if and when the parents pass away. And that's one thing to be very aware of. Many states are pushing back on this. I know Florida has just recently passed it that this money is protected from Medicaid. Many other states are pushing for that, but most states right now have that provision to say they might be able to come back. It's a gray area, I realize. And so a couple other things to consider, frequently asked questions. The individual who is the child we're planning for is the owner of this account, and they can only have one account. Only one ABLE account can be set up per individual, but many family members, many people can contribute to this. There's no limit to how many people can contribute, only that $15,000 limit. And so for you guys, for Michigan, and I have worked with families in helping them set up an account in Michigan. And so I can tell you guys from firsthand experience how wonderful your guys' state program is and how easy it is they make it to set up their program and how great their customer service is. But there's the website that we have there that you can learn more information about this. and you can go on and set up an account, and it literally takes 15 minutes to get an account set up for your child. Here's some figures that I talked about just a little bit ago. So your child can contribute, or you can contribute $15,000 annually in your guys' estate plan. If your child has a job, they can contribute an additional $12,060 on top of the $15,000 that you as parents and as loved ones can contribute. And so if they make $12,060 or more in their annual income per year, that's what they can put in. If they make $5,000 a year, they're capped at $5,000 of what they can put in additional to that $15,000. So your child can contribute their wages into what they're getting. Again, account limit is $15,000. But one thing I want you guys to be aware of, and one thing that is very unique to you as residents of Michigan, is that Michigan gives you a state income deduction. So for individuals who file individually, if you put in $5,000 or more into an ABLE account, you can deduct $5,000 of your income off your taxes. If you're filing jointly with a spouse, you can deduct $10,000. And so not many states, I would say more states than not, do not have the state income advantage. So you guys have a great advantage of being in Michigan for these accounts. And so I'm going to quickly walk through the comparison of the two, because I think this is going to be the slide that helps you guys understand what are the differences, how do we use these. And the question I get all the time is, which one should I do? Which one is right for my family? And again, every family is completely different, but it's usually not either or. Most families use a specialist trust alongside and in conjunction with an ABLE account. And so the cost is a question that I get often with both of these. What does a specialist trust cost? Well, we need to get lawyers involved. And anytime we do that, there's a cost involved there. And so I see from a national standpoint, specialist trust can cost between $3,000 and $6,000 to set up and administer. So there's a price barrier with that. In contrast, the ABLE accounts is relatively cheap. For Michigan, you guys can set up your ABLE account with as little as $25 deposited into the account. So from a cost standpoint, an ABLE account is much cheaper to administer. Taxes are another important thing to understand. So from a specialty trust standpoint, all earnings are taxed. And if there's money inside a specialty trust, there's got to be an annual tax return that's filled out. And that falls on the shoulders of the trustee. For an ABLE account, taxes grow tax-free. So as you're accumulating money, as you're growing your money within the ABLE account, you don't owe taxes every single year. There's no tax return. And if you use it for approved expenses, there's no taxes on withdrawing the money. So there's many benefits from a tax standpoint for an ABLE account. And how it affects means tested benefits. So the specialty trust will not affect any government benefits that you have. You can have unlimited money inside a specialty trust without impacting SSI and Medicaid. From an ABLE account standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, the number that we have to understand is $100,000. And that's what it is currently. It might change in the future, but we can't have more than $100,000 in this account before we lose SSI. And how do we use these accounts? From a specialty trust standpoint, the use can be very broad, but it should not cover housing expenses or food. It should not be given cash directly from the specialty trust to the individual, because those three options right there would likely limit and impact government benefits. And so the purpose of these two accounts are to make sure that we get government benefits to the max extent possible. And so You can't use it for food. You can't use it for shelter. Those are two guidelines to remember when it comes to special needs trust. Uses for ABLE accounts. Funds must be used for qualifying disability expenses. And that's something important to understand also. What is a qualified disability expense? Because that's a very broad term when it comes to every single ABLE website when you look at the IRS. And so what I tell families as I'm helping them understand these is that ABLE accounts, as long as it's used for your child and you can justify why it was a need for your child, it's a disability related expense. So if your child needs a new pair of shoes and you document it, it's a disability related expense. If they need to go to Disneyland for an experience, you can use your ABLE accounts. It's a disability related expense. The key thing that you need to understand and remember is we need to document everything. You need to write down what you spent and why you spent it and how it was in benefit for your child. Because if you ever got audited with your ABLE accounts, you need to provide that documentation of what was spent out of the accounts. So that's important. The account ownership for both. So for a special needs trust, it's owned by a family member. It's not owned by your child. And that gets into the legal aspects of how we can still continue getting government benefits. But the ABLE accounts actually is owned by your loved one. They own their own accounts, but it's still sheltered. Special needs trust is a little bit more difficult to access money. So a trustee has to be named, and the trustee has to distribute the funds according to the trust. And there's expenses in with that. There's complexities with that. So that's why I look at that as more of a long-term estate planning vehicle, where on the other hand, the ABLE accounts, it's very easy to access the money. Most states, including Michigan, have a debit card associated with it that you can swipe directly out of that. For special needs trusts that are third party, as I mentioned, funds can go to a remaining family member. But for an ABLE account, as it says right now, funds might go back to paying Medicaid. And then lastly, there's no age range on disabilities from when it comes to special needs trust, but from an ABLE account, you have to start by age 26. The disability has to start by age 26. Excuse me. So that was a lot right there, but I found that this helps give you the contrast of comparing both of these as we go through this. So the next area of planning is the legal plan. And so the legal plan, which includes some of these special needs trusts, helps control and protect and transfer your assets according to your wishes today and at the time of your death, and ensures that your entire special needs plan that you've created continues to be fulfilled even when you're no longer able to make decisions. And so in order to create the legal documents necessary to protect your family, your wills and your trusts and your power of attorney, it's important to understand the purpose of each type of document. It's also important to understand the various roles that people are going to play. We'll get into all that in here in a little bit. But basically what this does, it makes sure your plan continues to happen and protects your plan as you see fit. So on page 6 of your workshop guideline or guidebook, you have a basic checklist. How do you know if you're well planned from a legal planning standpoint? This will walk through many of the important details of a special needs plan and how it relates to legal planning, and making sure that you have all of the information there. Making sure you have every single legal document that will protect your child and protect your family. And oftentimes I see families who say, we have a legal plan. It's great. And I'm so glad when I see that families taking the proactive steps in creating certain aspects of planning. But it's so important that the legal plan is done very precisely. Because I've seen too many times a family has a 2-paragraph amendment in their will talking about a special needs trust. And in their mind, they think this is a special needs trust. But what would happen if the parents were to pass away Medicaid would look at that and say, there's no valid special needs trust. That money is actually ours. And oftentimes the court would agree with that. So we've got to make sure that our legal planning documents are done by a professional that has experience in creating special needs trusts. So that's important to think through. And we're coming up on time, so we're going to move through this a little quicker. So after you have the next step of the planning process, the life plan, but after your foundation is set, after you've got a vision of what success looks like, after you've got a financial plan and a legal plan that are aligned and working together, and now you have the peace of mind to know that you're doing everything in your power to plan for your child's great future and be secure no matter what happens, now we get to take a step back and say, okay, now how do we plan for abundance? How do we plan for great things to happen for our loved ones? And so the next step is creating a life plan. Sometimes it's known as a letter of intent. And so a life plan does many things. The life plan is going to document the important details about your family and your child. It's going to describe your child's daily routines, their likes and dislikes, their medications, their food allergies. Basically everything that you guys know as parents that's in your head is written down. And this is going to serve as a benchmarking tool to show annual progress. Within your life plan, I encourage families to have so much more detail than just the basics. Where are we today? And as we revise the life plan a year from now, how far have we come? Because I find we've got to be able to celebrate the large and maybe small milestones that we see in our life. And this also functions as a transition guide in the future. And so for me and my family, as close to my sister as I am, there are so many things about her that I don't know. What medications would you take? Who's the doctor that recommended those? What supplements is she on? And the list goes on and on and on. And so my question to you is, if you went out of town for a long weekend, or if there was a more permanent transition that occurred in the future, would a babysitter or would a future caregiver have all the information that they would need to know to step in and love and care for your child? And that's what a life plan does for you. And so at the bottom of page 6 is where this will start in your guidebook. And this is just one part of a life plan that's very important to document. What does a typical day look like for your child? I know for my sister, her routine is very important for her. And somebody else would need to know that if my mom and dad weren't around. And so this gives you the beginning steps of writing down each of the daily routines that's so important for your child. And this life plan came about many years ago in our planning process because I had a conversation with the dad, talking with him about his child. We were sitting in the middle of Starbucks, and it was just an initial conversation of just getting to know each other. And he was talking about his daughter, who was nonverbal and in a wheelchair. And he was sharing with me and laughing about how there's certain ways that she likes to be put in a wheelchair in the morning, and there's certain ways that she doesn't. And I asked him, I said, who else knows about that? And he paused and broke down in the middle of that Starbucks. I think for the first time realizing how much he and his wife knew about their daughter that nobody else would. But those were details that they needed to know. And so, have you got these things documented? If you have, where are they? And do other people know where they are? And the next step is the resource plan. And so we started this whole conversation of each of the areas of planning. We started with the vision plan, right? Understanding and painting that beautiful picture of what does success look like? What does a great life for your child look like? But we know that we can't do it alone. We've got to create a team. So the resource plan helps identify what services, what organizations, what individuals, what technology we need surrounding our family to make sure that that vision of success for our child's life can become a reality. And part of this resource plan is utilizing every single government benefit that our loved ones are entitled to. That resource plan is very important. And so the exercise that we have that's on page 8 here is what are you using? What outside the box resources do you have that you're currently using that have allowed your child to have great strides in their abilities? And in a live events, I oftentimes open it up to families to be able to share with each other what resources they're planning for, and what resources will help their child. These are so many outside the box and creative resources that are now allowing our loved ones to thrive, to create self-esteem, to create confidence, to create the skills and abilities that are going to ultimately allow for that great life to happen. And so again, I want to encourage you to go back into this, talk to your family, talk to your loved one, talk to the people on your team that are going to help you create this plan, and understand what are some of the unique, creative, and outside the box resources that we need to incorporate to make sure that we're getting closer to what our vision plan says. And then lastly, the family meeting or the transition plan. And this is such an important step to make sure that you are assembling your team. That not only that the team is in place, but your team knows exactly what their roles are. It gets all the key family members and friends who are currently involved in your child's life and your child's future. It's siblings, it's grandparents, it's support staff, it's teachers, therapists, maybe future guardians, and there's so many more people that parents invite to be on their team. It helps those people understand what does success look like, and then how to make sure they understand their roles. And it helps share all the important details if you weren't here, making sure that team is assembled. And so, who are those key members? So, step one of creating this family meeting or this transition plan is creating who are these people that we need to make sure are on the same page. So the questions here are, who are the key members of your child's life? That's going to be able to help you start identifying who needs to be on the team. And what do those people need to know about your plan today and the future? And how can they create opportunities today for your child? I find that so many people are eager to help families plan for abundance. So how can they help? And then what role do they play today? And what role would they play in the future? And do they understand their responsibilities with that? You've likely thought through who would be a trustee. You've likely thought through who would be a guardian and many other areas of your child's future. But do they understand the full extent of what their responsibilities are? This family meeting and transition plan helps make sure everybody is on the same page. And again, this is on page 9 of your guidebook. And so remember those emotions that I talked about earlier. Every single family tells me they feel these emotions and more throughout their planning journey. And I know my family felt these, and we still do at times when planning for Sarah's future. We're often worried about her future. We're overwhelmed by the planning process at times. Many families tell us they don't know where to start. Where do you find the time in planning? They're afraid of the future sometimes. Oftentimes they feel stuck. These are things that I hear. So we have created our process because I understand these emotions. Again, my family felt these and continues to feel these as we plan for the system. And so whether you reach out to us or whether you use our free guides and process to help you walk through this process, everything that we do is designed to make the planning process as easy as possible. And so after walking through our process, families are going to have a clear why. And this will help you overcome any of those emotions that pop up. Families will have a clear vision for what success looks like today and in the future. They'll have a financial plan in place that allows you to feel secure in today and your family's future goals. You'll have a legal plan to make sure that your entire plan for your child is protected and make sure that everybody understands their roles, people who are named in this legal plan. You'll make sure that all of the details about your child are written down and organized and easy to update documents so that family members can care and love your child if you're gone for a long weekend. You'll know that you have the resources in place to allow for your child's unique abilities to continue to blossom. And then lastly, you'll have a family meeting and a transition plan so that everybody is clear on what their role is today and what their role is in the future. And ultimately, through these free guides, through our free resources, and through our planning process, our goal is to bring families peace of mind. That you're doing everything in your power to plan for your child's great future. Plan for your entire family's great future. And so what I find is that when most families come to us, and you guys might relate to this, there are 3 challenges that they face. And these are the questions that I hear. Number 1, I barely have enough time to plan for today. How will I ever think about planning for the future? And number 2, even if I did have time to plan for the future, where do I begin? What's right for my family? And then lastly, how can I ever have enough money to achieve all the goals that I have? Other college goals, other family goals, retirement, short, midterm goals, plus the goal of providing for your child in the future, for today and the future. And so to help with that, we have a free start guide that we want to be able to scratch the surface here. I'll give you information about that in a second. But we want to create a clear roadmap of what that is, how to overcome those challenges. Because again, with those emotions, every single family tells us time is the biggest factor in creating a plan. As I mentioned in the beginning, planning shouldn't be focused on life's what-ifs. Planning should be focused on the abundance that life has to offer for our loved ones. But we know that life is fragile. We know that life is uncertain. And our team gets so many emails from families who are planning out of tragedy, planning out of a life event that has changed the course of their life. And this is just one sample email, something I got that I blocked off the names for. But this sibling lived in Florida, and her mother and her twin brothers lived in New York. And her mother unexpectedly passed away. And she reached out to us, frantic, not knowing what to do. And while our team will help a family plan no matter what circumstances they're coming from, there are certain things that we couldn't do. And this individual that reached out to us told us how frustrated she was that her mother and her never had those conversations, and how much it was such a struggle to plan for her brothers now. And so I want to encourage you, while focus of planning should not be the what ifs in life. Life is uncertain. I want to encourage you to use this time together, use these free guides that I'm giving you, use that as a catalyst to get your planning started, to give you peace of mind that no matter what happens, your child and your family are well protected. And so, as I mentioned, we have barely scratched the surface of all the 5 areas of planning. And so the thing that I want to offer to you guys is a free quick start guide that's going to go in much more detail than what we had time to talk about today is, again, this quick start guide. And this is the website that you can go to grab that. It's absolutely free. But inside, it's going to have a self-assessment that helps you determine where you are in each of the 5 areas of planning and what needs your focus. It's going to give you questions to have and consider with your team in each of the 5 areas of planning. And it's going to give you checklists of things that you need to get accomplished in each of these 5 areas. Again, we want to make this as easy for you guys as possible. And so I'm ready to open up for questions if there has been any. Here's information about our organization. If anybody has specific questions that are for their family, I'm happy to jump on a call with you or email you and answer any questions you have. Here's the guide that I mentioned that is completely free that we'd love to offer you guys. So before I open up to questions, again, I want to emphasize that I believe that planning has got to be focused on the abundance that life has to offer. And each family is different. Each family has unique goals. Each family has unique challenges, but the focus should be providing an amazing future for our loved one. And that amazing future is unique to every amazing individual that we're planning for. So I appreciate you guys being here. Open for any questions you guys have.
Thanks, Phil, so much. That was just really, really great information. And just from comments in the chat, people have really appreciated the guide too. I think that's going to be really helpful for everybody. We did have a couple questions that came in just as you were talking. One of them was, do special needs, does special needs planning include families who have children or loved ones with severe mental illness, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, who also may be disabled to the extent that they won't be able to live on their own?
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely. Special needs planning in my mind is, do we have somebody in our life, a loved one, who is going to need some additional care and consideration and providing support for the future? And so we work with many families who the main challenge is a mental health challenge or a addiction challenge. So it doesn't have to be a diagnosis that we're planning for. Anybody who needs additional support and care for the future, we need to have those additional conversations. The challenge becomes how we approach government benefits, because there are certain things that the government looks at in terms of SSI and Medicaid and Medicaid waivers. Says certain things like autism absolutely are a diagnosis that's approved. Some things aren't. And so every family has their own unique journey of how they're going about that. But yes, absolutely, mental health is something that we see quite frequently with our families.
Great, thank you. And then another question that came in was, I know you had talked, about establishing special needs trusts and using the MyAble account. Are there, what options are available for low income families who may have a child with special needs that they're trying to do, future planning for?
Yeah, great question. So the ABLE account is, like I said in that comparison guide, a relatively inexpensive way to save for your child's short and midterm future. And so that is a great place to start. When it comes to setting up special needs trusts, they are cost prohibitive at some points. And so there are a lot of nonprofit organizations such as the ARC in many states that will help you get involved with their pool trust. So the cost won't be as great as if you were getting an attorney to create your own personal trust.
Okay, great. No,
that's for those families, the pool trust is a great resource.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really good to know. Okay, next question that came in, for an ABLE account, are there any monthly fees? And if so, how are the fees structured?
Yeah, good question. So most states have a monthly administration fee, and it's a couple dollars a month, if that, and every state is different. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what Michigan's fee was. Sometimes it's an annual fee, sometimes it's a monthly fee, but it's minimal. And how it's taken out is it's pulled from the account monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever those fees are set up to be. So you're never receiving an invoice for what you owe. It's taken out directly out of the account.
Okay, perfect. And then last question that we have, what kinds of things can you use the money for in a trust or an ABLE account? And is it different in terms of you can only use it in certain ways for a trust or an ABLE account, or how can you use that money that are in both of those different accounts?
Yeah, I should probably have a separate workshop based on that one question. I get that all the time, and it's complex. I'll do my best to keep it short and concise. ABLE accounts are very easy to use the money out of. ABLE accounts, oftentimes in Michigan is one of those states, you can have a debit card associated with your ABLE accounts to swipe. And for an ABLE account, like I said, all you have to do is document and prove that whatever you're spending out of that is in fact an expense that's related to your child. And if you ever get audited, that is what they're looking for, making sure it's for your child. For a special needs trust, it's a little more complex. You have to have a trustee working with the guardian, and then working together the guardian can request certain bills to be paid or certain things to be funded for and provided for. The only things you should not pay for out of the special needs trust is housing and food and giving cash directly to the beneficiary. Those are the three things that are going to potentially impact long-term government benefits. But the special needs trust is more broad when it comes to what it can be paid for. But again, it all is focused on your child. Is the expense within accordance to the trust that you have drafted? And within that trust, parents have the flexibility to say, I want these expenses to be covered for. I want college or higher education to be covered for out of this. So a family can have rigid guidelines when it comes to a special needs trust or very broad guidelines when it comes to a special needs trust. And really at that point, it's up to the trustee and the guardian to interpret the trust and make distributions according to the trust wishes. So there's a lot of complexity in there. But from a 10,000-foot view, the ABLE account's so easy to access money, especially trust is a little more difficult to get money out of.
Okay, thank you. And then a couple more questions came in. One of them is, well, first, where are you located, your office?
We serve families across the country. We have advisors across the country, but I am located, our headquarters is located in Indianapolis, Indiana. And
okay.
We serve many families in Michigan, but we started here in Indiana, and our intention was to serve families here in Indiana. And it wasn't until our unique approach of planning that families started reaching out saying, how can we plan with you?
Okay, great. Thank you. So another question that came in, can you pay a student loan from money that's in an ABLE account?
Yeah, it would be, as long as you can document that that money is going to an expense that was for your child. So if it was for the individual, for the owner of that account, which the owner would be the individual with special needs, it would be approved for. You couldn't pay a student loan for another child because that would go outside of that individual. But if it's for your child, then it would be approved.
Okay, great. So I don't see any other questions that came in. Just as a reminder, for those of you who hadn't done so yet, if you would like to download a copy of the participant guide, it is up on our conference page on our AAOM website. And if any of you have more specific, questions, certainly Phil has all of his contact information here, so please feel free to reach out to him. You can also reach out to an AAOM navigator if needed as well. And yeah, I think that's all we have for this morning. Phil, thanks so much for doing this. It was really incredibly helpful. And the guide book was a big hit. So yeah, so thanks so much, everybody.